Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I so wish I start every digital class the same way. I wish that we could be physically sitting together in the same physical space physically. It helps to connect hearts, but we're going to connect hearts anyway. So my hope and my intention is that we will spend this hour together as if I were sitting with you, because I am sitting with you. Julie, could I ask you please to just put in the chat box the link for today's source sheet in case people don't have it? I also will share my screen now so that we can be together in our text as well as in our hearts. For the opportunity to be together and to learn together, to bring in this taste of Shabbat together, let's offer this bracha, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign in all time and space, who makes us holy in mitzvot, in connecting commands, and commands us to engage in these words of wisdom. As we have done with our other classes, what we are doing is taking the mitzvah path, the path of holy doings, and fusing them like a DNA helix with the mysticism, the spiritual opportunities that the mitzvah encodes. For some people, the mystical path of Judaism supersedes the holy doing. And for some people, the holy doing path that has charted so many of our ancestors' steps on this multi-generational, multi-century evolution of Jewish life has crowded out the mysticism. What we're doing here is twinning them together. We've done that for 3 mitzvot, and we're going to do that for a 4th one, especially at this time of pandemic, when healing of all kinds is something for which we crave as individuals, as families, as communities, as a society, as a planet. The subject of healing now comes forward. We have many mitzvot around healing. The obligation to get the best medical care you can. This bracha that we're going to look at, this mitzvah that we're going to look at, arises in the context of healing, but in particular a place that we don't often think about being a place of spirituality. And that is the latrine, the bathroom, the house of the chair, the commode, the john, the whatever it is you wish to call it. And along the way, we will bring in spirits and angels. As with all mitzvot, ours has a backstory. In fact, our backstory today comes in 2 episodes. So while I don't like to lecture, for time purposes, I'm going to bring us on a bit of a textual journey. Exodus 15 is just after the Song of the Sea. Our ancestors just came out of Egypt. I mean, just came out of Egypt. Awesome power, signs, and wonders, sea splitting, going through, Cecil B. DeMille movie, we've seen it all. And suddenly they come to this place called Mara, and they couldn't drink the waters there, for they were bitter. Ancient ambiguity about whether the they is the waters or they themselves. And so the people murmur to Moses saying, so what are we going to drink? And Moses cries to God, and you can see the texts there, but this is our point. If you listen, if you do what's right, if you keep God mitzvot, I won't treat you the way I treated the Egyptians. I, Yud He Vav He, am your healer. Ani Adonai Rofecha. This idea that we associate divinity with healing, that we think about, or maybe we don't even think about it, it's just inbred in us as spiritual beings, as Jews, as people who crave, who yearn. It's encoded in Jewish identity, lichatchila, from the beginning of our journey out of Egypt. First thing we know is that God is our healer. It's the first thing we're told. And the fact that God is our healer is placed in the context of things that flow, including bitter waters, which is very interesting to me. Fast forward to the prophet Jeremiah, who said that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is the hope of Israel. In Hebrew, literally the mikveh. The mikveh of the living waters, that pool, that pond, that bathtub, that place where people of some traditional derivations and some liberals who are rediscovering the mikveh tradition go to purify. God is our mikveh, literally. And then in texts that became part of the Jewish Amidah, the Jewish standing prayer, heal me, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved, for you are my praise. There it is, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the healer. Rifa'eni Adonai ve'ene erafeh, hoshi'eni ve'ivasheya ki tehilati ata, in the singular. If you're a shul goer and you go to synagogue on a daily minyan, you'll hear that in the plural. Rifa'enu Adonai ve'nerafeh, hoshi'enu ve'nivasheya ki tehilatenu ata. Divinity as healing. Divinity as healer. Something about flow and water, encoding this basic identity of spiritual life. Backstory, episode 1. Backstory, episode 2 is about place. Because you would imagine that if there's going to be a backstory about the flow of healing that we associate with divinity, flow, there'll be a few bathroom jokes today, flow, then we're also going to have a conversation about place. So here comes Isaiah 6. In the year that King Uzziyahu died, I, Isaiah, saw God sitting on a high and lofty throne. Hold on to that word throne. And the skirt of God's robe filled the temple, and seraphim stood in attendance, each with 6 wings, with 2 covering the face and 2 covering the legs, and with 2 flying. V'kara ze el ze ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivaot, Meloch ha'aretz kivodo. And they called one to the other, saying, Holy, holy, holy is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts. The whole earth fills with God's glory. Every place claims the prophet is full of God's glory. Every place is holy, holy, holy. Every place. So especially, it turns out, the place of illness. From Masechet Shabbat in Talmud, from where is it derived that the Holy Blessed One cares for the sick? As it is said in the book of Psalms, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh supports us on the bed of illness. So get this, one who enters to visit a sick person, one who engages in the holy art of Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, here's the normative tradition. You don't sit on the bed. And you don't sit on a chair. In ancient days, you would wrap yourself in a talit and you would sit low. Why? Because Shekhinah is above the head of the sick person. Because sickness, illness, is a special place of holiness. And if you've ever been in a hospital, even though no one typically likes to be in a hospital, we all have an inchoate sense that the journey of illness and healing is a journey of spiritual transformation, that the presence that we call Shekhinah, literally to dwell, the local call we call Shekhinah, is with us in that place. So for Isaiah, holiness is everywhere. In Talmud, the place that we associate with sickness is especially holy. Blood, guts, and gore. Imagine all the things in a hospital room. These are not things associated with ritual purity. Doesn't matter. Shekhinah is above the head of the sick person. The hospital bed, the sick bed, is a sacred place. But one tractate before the book of Shabbat is the book of Brachot. And our ancient forebears had a long discussion about where certain prayers could be offered. One may not recite the Shema opposite this kind of excrement or that kind of excrement or another kind of excrement or another kind of excrement or a bad-smelling dung heap as if there were good-smelling dung heaps. Thank you for clarifying that, Talmud. If it were a place 10 handbreadths above or 10 handbreadths below, you can sit near it and recite the Shema, but otherwise you have to distance yourself so that you can't see it, and the same is true for prayer. In fact, you can't even think about Torah in the bathhouse or the bathroom. בכל מקום מותר להרהר בדברי תורה חוץ מבית המרחץ ומבית הכיסא. The bathroom is euphemistically known as the house of the throne, the house of the chair. So our backstory gives us a conundrum, maybe several of them. God is our healer. It's linked directly to the exodus from Egypt, from every tight place. God fills the world, Isaiah said, Malochol haaretz kavodo, even from the house of God's chair, God's kiseh. And God's presence is especially palpable. We invoke Shekhinah above the sickbed. But don't even think about praying in your own house of the chair. This is normative tradition talking. So we have a problem. If all places are full of God's glory, and it comes from God's chair, how about our own flush zone? Is there something inherently unholy? Pun intended. The normative tradition is that we don't bring a talit or a Torah or a Siddur into a bathroom, and one can imagine all sorts of reasons why. And yet, there is the mitzvah to offer a bathroom blessing, not in the bathroom, just outside the bathroom. And for those of us who maybe have heard Debbie Friedman sing what became a very popular rendition of these words, this will be familiar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chochma, who formed humanity in wisdom. Uvaravo nikavim nikavim, chalulim chalulim, and created with us openings and openings and hollows and hollows. It's revealed and known before your throne of glory. What a pun. If one of them were opened, or closed. It'd be impossible to survive and to stand before you. Baruch atah Adonai rofecho basar umafli lasot. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh and does wondrously. It's a lot of Hebrew for some people, if you weren't raised with it. Baruch atah rofecho basar umafli la'asot works for me. Just the part that's in gray over there. Or, thank you, God, it finally came out. I've heard all sorts of versions of this. My version usually comes after, remember when we used to drive places? I would pass the rest area on the highway and only then would I need to go. And so my prayer would start long before, because the next rest area is in 35 miles. I'm seeing a whole bunch of heads going, yeah, that's how that works. How many of us, I'm going to stop the screen, share for just a moment. How many of us are shocked to imagine that Jewish tradition would offer us a traditional blessing for the bathroom? Only a couple of hands. Okay. Now, without raising your hands, now ask yourself, because I know most of us don't use it, why don't we use it? Here's what not going to ask anybody to self-identify, but here's what I'm willing to guess. I'm not thinking about holiness then. The holy I'm thinking about is not that. It's so an ingrained, unthinking part of my day. Why would I think to sanctify that? When I'm racing out of the bathroom, I'm racing out of the bathroom. I have food on the oven, a child screaming, work that needs to be done. Did I leave the iron on? Did I leave the baby on the iron? I mean, there's so much going on in our lives right now. You think being at home gives us more spaciousness. We all know otherwise. So here we are. We've got this traditional blessing that has so much beauty encoded in it, and a couple of really lovely puns too, and we don't use it. This makes us normal, but one of the meta messages that Talmud even offers us this, and we're going to unpack where this comes from, is that there's nothing in human life that that lacks for an opportunity to offer a blessing. I mean, could you imagine? We all can imagine, because we have bodies, what happens if it doesn't work? We want to and we can't. We don't want to and we did. Our lives fundamentally change from health to shame to autonomy. And for those of us for whom we've never thought of this, how much we, and I'll add myself here, have the penchant to take for granted that the plumbing works. Blessed are you who heals all flesh and does wondrously. So an invitation to you, print this out, put it outside your bathroom. The tradition would be outside the bathroom. Print it out. Make it like a mezuzah. Not on the bathroom door, same idea. What would happen? Would you notice on your way in that what's about to happen is kind of miraculous? Would you notice on the way out that what just happened is kind of miraculous? What effect would that have on our day? The mitzvah is to wash the hands. We lift up our hands and we say, Baruch atah al netilat yadayim, for lifting up of the hands. It's not for causing us to wash our hands. It's actually for lifting up our hands in holy service. Al netilat yadayim. And then we offer this blessing. Some people do it in the opposite order. I think it needs to be done in the first order for reasons that we don't offer this in the bathroom. We want to wash our hands in the bathroom, not out of the bathroom. So that's the backstory in the mitzvah. Of course, what interests me, especially now, is the mysticism part. What is this does wondrously thing, especially in a world where there's a lot of healing that's happening and a lot of healing that's not? Many people are surprised to find, as has been our tradition over this series of classes, that the first place that I look to for the mystical tradition is not Zohar, is not what we'll call the woo-woo. It's Shulchan Aruch itself, the code of Jewish law of the Middle Ages that codified the Jewish normativity of its day. Moshe Isserles, the Ramah, was the main commentator on Joseph Caro's major text. And he has all these notes that are integrated into the Shulchan Aruch. And here's what he said about this. Some explain that does wondrously in Baruch Atah Adonai Rofecho Basar Umafli La'asot, does wondrously, means that God keeps the human spirit in the body and binds the spirit to the corporeal. The kosher, not kosher with a kaf like kosher food, but kosher, to bind. That divinity is the bind, the connector between the corporeal and the spiritual. Of course, divinity is also the body, and divinity is also the soul. Now we understand divinity as the connector between the two, binds the two. And how is that? It's because Al Yedei Shehu Rofecho Basar, because God is the healer of all flesh. Encoded in the Ramah, encoded in the Shulchan Aruch, is a profound teaching about what healing really is. Healing is not cure. Healing is not, I can go run a marathon. Healing is the spiritualization of physical life. Healing is the spiritualization of physical life. What to heal is to bind the physical and the spiritual together. That is the definition of healing in Jewish spiritual life. And that is encoded in Shulchan Aruch itself. We forget that. We forget sometimes in our race for the cure and the vaccine, all of which are critical, that's one form of healing. But sometimes there can be healing when there is no cure. And sometimes there can be healing when there's no disease. Going to the bathroom, even if all the plumbing works, halavai. Imagine if we treat that like a healing. If we appreciate it like a healing. If we celebrate it like a healing. And for those of us for whom so often the plumbing doesn't work exactly the way we want, I'm seeing the heads go like this. Yeah, got it. Now comes Zohar. With this fundamental principle that fights a little bit with the proposition from Talmud that there are some places where we just don't do this. Some of us may have heard these words as a chant. Mimale kol alamin, this is Aramaic. The sobev kol alamin, umibala decha ein shu mitziut klal. You fill all worlds, you surround all worlds. Without you, there'd be no reality at all. Are we willing to put that in our intestines? How far will we take our spirituality? How far will we take the proposition that we've been developing all this time, that proposition that is the core of Jewish life, Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad, Achdut, unity, unification, only one, everywhere, all the time. Monotheism in that form means in the bathroom too, in the intestines too, the blood, guts, and gore too. You fill all worlds, you surround all worlds. Without you, there'd be no reality at all. Our very ability to use the bathroom means that all the holes that need to be opened are closed, and all the holes that need to be closed, you get it. What needs to be open is open. What needs to be closed is closed. If we get it wrong, it's kind of over. It's a radical theology. And it fights with the idea that there are some places that are not holy. And by that, I do not mean the pun. My understanding of the opposite of holy is not profane, it's ordinary. My own theology is that the entire world, melochola aretz kvodo, the whole world is full of God's glory, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. Some things just don't look it. Or some things are potentially holy, or their holiness needs to be uncovered in some way. But the whole world, if those words are right, then everything is holiness in drag, in potentiality, at least. If so, then also the bathroom. And for those of us for whom this is a challenging prospect, because we are used to having our holy places over here and our garbage dumps over there and our synagogues over here and our homes over here, some of that's getting mixed up right now, huh? What is one of the great challenges of this time, as a few of you shared before we started, now also becomes an opportunity. So I want to stop here for a moment before we bring in the angels, because the angels are now going to accompany us the rest of the way. I want to stop here, take everybody's temperature, invite one or two comments or confusions or things that just are urging to be offered, and then we'll go back and pick up with our angels. So if you have a question or comment, Julie, if you can please help move the airplanes on the runway.
Absolutely. So for those who missed the tech in the beginning, you can either chat something in the chat box and read your comment out loud, or if you'd like to be unmuted, if you can find the raise hand function that's in the participants box on the bottom right. And we have a question or a comment from Rachel Rudansky. You're unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
I wanted to just ask you about that, you know, in embryological development, the openings of the digestive tract are very ancient. They're the part of the most ancient structures in our body. And I wondered when we were coming into class today, I was wondering if that had anything to do with why it's held holy or revered in this way.
I would love to tell you yes, Rachel. I can't for two reasons. The first is that I don't know. The second is that, brilliant as our rabbinic forebears are, they got a whole bunch of anatomy and physiology wrong. Just flat wrong. Love them as I do. One of the reasons we lean left for Passover, they actually wrote this, is so that, you know, take a piece of matzah, lean left, because of the way that our esophagus and trachea are. If we lean right, we'll choke. Really? They actually got it wrong. They did the best they could with what they knew. I'm pretty confident that they had not done sufficient embryological anatomical study to know that. But there's also a world wisdom out there, and ours is not the only tradition to look for holiness, pun intended, in all those places. So I think the answer is no, but I think there's actually a more important question in there, and the answer to that question is yes. Thank you, Rachel.
Josephine, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I realize that this is probably a much larger discussion than what you have time to get into, but would you recommend some resources on this idea that holiness invades every part of our life, and yet we have these laws of purity and impurity, and how we can have something that's holy but impure?
Thank you for that question, Josephine. I'm going to ask that you please email me. My email address is at the top of the source sheet. Anyone who has a question or a comment that it didn't make it here, or that it's a bit more involved to unpack, please email me. Josephine, that's a great question. There are resources. I'd be delighted to share a few with you. Thank you.
And we'll post Rabbi Markus's email in the chat box in just a minute. Other questions or comments? I see Tally Ann, you are unmuted.
Okay, thank you so much. Many years before, I would say 30 years ago, a rabbi who I knew said the most important prayer is this prayer. And of all the prayers, he said this prayer was the most important. And I just personally remember when I had surgery for removing my gallbladder, just the pain for days, that when I went to the bathroom and afterwards, and literally in just tears flowing, said this prayer. And never before that, we just take something like this so for granted, that it is just incredible why this, I fully realized why this prayer was so important. So I really was very excited about having a class focus on it, because it's something people sort of avoid. And that's why so many things I appreciate also about the Orthodox tradition, that it's posted, if you're an Orthodox, and it's posted so that you do take advantage and take it. And I thank you for inviting, Rabbi, for inviting others to print this and take it and have it for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Tali. Yep. The things that are closest to us, we are most likely to take for granted. It's sort of like the fish that can't see the water they swim in. The things that are most proximate are the things that don't stand out. If you haven't been to the bathroom in a week, I guarantee you're going to notice. Thank you, Talianne. We have time for one more, and then I want to bring the angels in.
Leslie, you're unmuted.
I just wanted to say that as you get older, which I am, you realize the functions, you thank God for the functions much more. And I have done that, actually. I didn't know there was an actual prayer. Now I know. But it also helps to explain why my grandfather, who was an immigrant and Orthodox, would never pray with the bathroom door open. And, and I never knew why. Well, you have uncovered the truth. So
Pun intended with the uncovered. Exactly. Exactly.
Yes,
I mean, there's all these, bathroom jokes that we can make. And they're also part of a tradition that finds in those seemingly unlikely places incredible holiness. Many of us perhaps have heard the story, imagined that on Shabbat we have two angels that follow us. And one angel says to the other, may next Shabbat be like this one. No matter what your Shabbat is, you're having a Shabbat, you're not having a Shabbat. And the other one says, Amen. Essentially, what you've started this week, may it be like next week. Therefore, let's have a lovely Shabbat. What if I told you that angels also follow you to the bathroom? The same text that generates the Asher Yatzar, the blessing that we're looking at, begins with this. This is the cleanest, pun intended, translation I can offer. One entering the house of the chair says, be honored, honored and holy servants of the Most High. Give glory to the God of Israel. Leave me until I enter and do my will. Then I will come back to you. So, just take that in for a second. You're going to the bathroom. You turn over to your shoulder on your way in, and you say to the angels who have been, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh all this time, you say to them, hang out here for a minute. I love you. Hang out. I'll be right back. If someone were to watch you do this at a rest area on the thruway, you might not make it back to your car. And this is straight out of Talmud. Gets better. Rabbi Abaye says, don't say this. Because then the holy beings, the angels, will go. You told them to go, they'll go. But rather, say this: guard me, help me, support me, wait for me to enter and come out, for such is humanity's way. You could imagine a Jackie Mason scene right now, right? So Jackie Mason, the comic, is sitting there in the bathroom saying, guard me, help me. It's hysterical in its way. There are so many jokes we can tell. But our rabbinic forebears understood that not just are there angels, but that the moment we go into the bathroom is precisely the time to talk to them. And that we can ask for their help. And that this is the way of humanity. That our rabbinic ancestors would spill Talmudic ink on this subject, to me, is very telling. It tells me that the experience of being in the bathroom, which back then was a little bit less pleasant, perhaps, a little bit less sanitized, nevertheless, and maybe precisely so, was the time to engage in communion with the spiritual. We might have a halachic discussion about whether they said it inside the privy or outside the privy. For our purposes right now, what's important is that they had the conversation at all. And that the impulse to use the bathroom became the pointer to have that moment of communion. As adults, we are so habituated, you gotta go, you go. And then once you've gone, you went, the end. But this is saying something else. This is saying on the way in, that impulse is a moment of conscious intention to channel the angels. And on the way out, having done so, is an opportunity to give a moment of gratitude. Asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chochma. Baruch atah Adonai rofecho basar u'mafli la'asot. Wow. So what happened? Most people don't do this anymore. Shulchan Aruch gives us an answer to that too. Because Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law, and this is not the Ramah anymore, this is Joseph Caro himself. He also said, pulling exactly this text from Brachot, pulling exactly this text from the Talmud, he said, when one enters the house of the chair, it's the same chair, kisei. He says, yes, you got to say, be honored, you honored and holy servants, etc. But now we are unaccustomed to saying this. It sort of fell out of vogue. Some hundreds of years ago, the inherent spirituality that we will call mysticism went underground. And by that, I do not mean a bathroom pun. I really do mean it became under the surface of normative expression, as we saw in a couple of prior classes. But just barely. Just barely. We saw with the mezuzah that the mysticism was right there. The Shabbat candles, the mysticism was right there. The motzi, the hands on the lechem, on the bread, right there. The mysticism was right there. So too here. It's right there. But we've become unaccustomed to it. We've become unaccustomed precisely in those activities of life that have become most automated. That the mystical path of the mitzvot is precisely to disrupt the automation and say this too is a miracle. this too. For those of us for whom the plumbing works, and we don't have to think about it, and it's so reliable that what I'm saying seems almost fanciful, this may seem a little bit of a leap. If you've ever experienced in adult life either a physical or some other reason that that is not true, we may have some feels around that, like we don't want to remember. And it's also a cue to remember that we can't take anything for granted without running the risk of all that we lose by taking it for granted. Jewish spiritual life is about this moment, and this moment, and this candle, and this breath, and this bathroom, and this doorway. So be honored, and holy servants. Now I'm talking about not just the angels, but also you. We are unaccustomed to saying this. We are unaccustomed. But we can reclaim that. And as difficult and far away as it may seem, it's actually as close as your nearest bathroom. When the impulse comes, whatever your sense of the angelic may be, the transcendent, the supernatural, the anthropomorphized, we don't all have to believe in angels with wings. Whatever that is for you, it becomes a moment to say, what's about to happen is a miracle. I hope I realize that and can offer a moment of gratitude when I come out. And then you come out. The words themselves are not magic. At least I don't believe they are. But the impulse is. The kavanah can be, the intention can be. And to me, it's extraordinary that even for a people that from Talmud's earliest pages got wiggy about praying in certain kinds of places, that we would make sure to have a bathroom prayer. A bathroom prayer. We're used to the candles. We're used to the bread. A bathroom prayer, it's equally Jewish. Amen. Don't drink. So I want to stop here and harness a couple of more comments and questions, perhaps from folks that haven't had an opportunity. And then we'll do a little bit of a siyum for our 4-class series.
Okay, great. So we do have some questions in the chat box. I actually sent you one or two. And I'll read this one from Ruth. I think I read in Talmud that there is no prayer for taking medicine. Can we still say a prayer? And if so, which one?
That's a great question. I've heard a few answers to this one. It actually came up at a prior class. If we understand medicine as a kind of food, we can say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol yihiyeh bidvaro, that all things are made by your will. And that focuses on the thing that we're consuming. If we understand this not to be about consuming a thing, but also, or primarily about healing, why would we not say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Rofeh cholim, healer of the sick, or Rofeh chol basar umafli la'asot, healer of all flesh and doing wonders. Just because it's a text that's used in a bathroom prayer doesn't mean that we can't say Rofeh cholim, because actually the Talmudic derivation of this text goes into the minds of the rabbis. Exactly how did they choose these words? Some said Rofei Cholim. And then one other rabbi said, what, every time someone goes to the bathroom, it means they're sick? No. Say umaflila asot, just it's wonderful. And so, of course, in that Fiddler on the Roof way of how can you be right and you be right, well, you're also right, they said both. Rofecho vasar umaflila asot, and that's how it happened. We can pray how we pray, knowing that really smart people came before us and gave us pathways. But it's about the journey, not their pathway. So heck yes, you can offer a blessing. And it does not have to be in Hebrew either. The Shulchan Aruch makes very clear that when you are praying in the presence of someone for healing, it can be in whatever language. As an exception to even the rabbis who wanted Hebrew, this is an exception. Healing is an exception. If your language is Vulcan, it will work fine. Use your language. Use your language. May this pill be for my healing. Dear God, please, if you're a God person. Baruch atah. Absolutely. Thank you for that very important question.
Okay, so there's a bunch of questions in the chat box. I'm not sure how much we have time for. Someone brought up this idea that some people think disease could be a sign of a spiritual malady. Could you speak to that?
I can, thank you. We have in Jewish tradition many streams of thought around the relationship between illness and healing on the one hand and spirituality on the other. One of our texts that we saw in the very beginning, I'll actually share it with us again, from Exodus. If you diligently listen to the voice of Adonai your God and do what is right in God's sight and give ear to God's mitzvot and keep all God's statutes and eat your vegetables and do your homework, then I will not put on you any of the diseases that I put on the Egyptians. In the 1300s, Rav Nissen wrote that the Black Plague of that day surely was proof that God had come to the view that the people had ceased to follow Torah. And in text that I have taught in seminary, he said the equivalent of, when will you finally turn to the ways of the Almighty? Now I have some challenge with that, because that same idea was used to say that people who had AIDS in the 1980s had violated God's law. There is that thread in spiritual tradition and not just Jewish tradition. Others, including Reb Nachman of Breslov, says that every sickness is not necessarily a punishment from God, but a manifestation of an underlying spiritual hurt that asks to be healed. Others say that every sickness that comes along is a call from God to turn to God in a positive way. The story is told of the King Hezekiah, Chizkiyahu, in the prophetic days, and a midrash that explained why it was that the prophet went to him and said, well, you've been on the throne 14 years, and God says, put your affairs in order, you're going to die. The midrash is, Chizkiyahu said to God, God, you know, it isn't good that people should live without getting sick, because if they don't get sick, they won't turn to you. And in this midrash, God said, you're right. I'll start with you. And the text continues that Chizkiyahu literally turned to the wall and poured his heart out. Jews Christians, Muslims, all people of spirit, have been wrestling the fundamental unfairness of illness, that bad things happen to good people. And for many people, and for many of our forebears, it's much easier to blame ourselves than to blame God, or to say that God can't heal us, or to say that God won't heal us. At issue here are fundamental issues of faith and theology that are the subject of a lifetime and libraries of text. I can offer you only my own spin on it, which is this. In a world in which we are co-creators, I do not believe that God sends us lemons, but I do believe that God, through healers and spiritual tradition, gives us many opportunities to make lemonade. And I also believe in a God who suffers with us. I believe in a God, and our traditions teach this as well, that Shekhinah that is over the sickbed also cries with us. So do I believe personally that spiritual sickness can cause physical sickness? Possibly. Do I believe that it's sent by God to teach us a lesson? No, I do not. I hope that's as helpful as time allows, and I welcome engagement by email on this. I know that it's not possible to do this question justice.
And I did put your email in the chat box for anyone that wants to follow up. And I'll also put the link to our YouTube page for anyone that wants to watch previous sessions.
Thank you, Julie. I wish that we could spend more time together. We've just begun really to do the dance of mitzvah and mysticism. But I want to close with a text that maybe all of us have heard somewhere. It comes from the bedtime Shema. For some of us, we will know it as Karl Bach's Angel Song. It isn't often that we look at the words carefully. B'Shem Hashem, in the name of God, Elohei Yisrael, the God of Israel. On my right may Michael be, the one we call Michael, the national angel of Israel, associated with love and strength, identity. Umismoli Gavriel, also strength, boundaries, capacity. Umilfanai Uriel, light in front of us. Ume Acharai Raphael, and behind us, Raphael from Rofeh, healing. Va'al Roshi, over the head, Va'al Roshi, Shechinat El, the spirit, the presence that we call God, over our head, no different than over the head of the sick in the hospital room. It is this kavanah to place these angels, spirits, energies, intentions around us before we go to bed that has become encoded in Jewish tradition. You look in any Siddur, including Orthodox, absolutely it's there. Healing is behind us where we're most vulnerable. Healing literally behind us. At a time in our people's evolution and our society's evolution that needs healing. We need the light that's in front of us. We need the healing that is with us and behind us, guarding us. To know that every place is pregnant with that holy possibility, not just the synagogue, but the Zoom screen, even the bathroom. And precisely those moments of vulnerability may be our most important moments to take note, to open up, to offer gratitude. Maybe that's the best healing we can have now.